I woke up this morning and I was reflecting on maps and how we have so many maps, so many ways that we humans have attempted to make sense of this, map it, right? Render it somehow. In the same way that we take, some geographical location in all of its vastness and complexity and map it, right? Sort of lay out the general terrain of that city or state or country or whatever. And as we know, the physical maps that we use to navigate around different locations are, incredibly useful. That simplification is it's a tool that we use, and we can really think of language. I'm using language right now, of course, in these meetings, trying to convey something. What am I trying to convey? Well, my effort to convey what I'm trying to convey linguistically is my effort to map what is essentially unmappable. And what's interesting about life, and really staggering to come to see and appreciate more and more, which is really the essence of what I'm talking about here in these meetings and in my writings, is the the impossibility of mapping this. And it's one thing to consider that. It's one thing to even feel inspired by that, maybe possibly not inspired, but at least intrigued by it, maybe even have a sense of the truth of that, maybe even a very deep sense of the truth of how unmappable this is, how unrenderable it is, if that's a word. That the infinity of what's here right now cannot be collapsed into any map. I mean, to really let the profundity of that sink in. And because we are operating in so many respects as if we can map it, as if we actually know what's happening, right? That's the power of language. And in one sense, the fact that we're able to communicate via language as we do, right? With the people in our lives and through our work, and all the ways we communicate through words, it's pretty damn convincing in some ways that we know what's going down because we've got words to describe all of this, seemingly, right? How else can I convey to you, how my day's going, or what work was like today, or how the new book is coming along, or how was your Zoom meeting this morning, John, and vice versa. Any queries I might send your way about your experience. So there's a paradox, which is, in one sense, the maps, our linguistic maps, our conceptual maps, seem to convey something, right? Hence the beauty of communication via words. And yet, it's actually impossible to collapse this. This is uncollapsible. And let yourself feel that. That this eludes description entirely. It's interesting in terms of what I'm saying about the impossibility of mapping holds it's true across the board. So whether we're just talking about, just ordinary human existence, day-to-day life and what's happening, seemingly what we're doing, seemingly, and describing that, mapping that again, linguistically, conceptually, or whether we're talking about in the whole sort of spiritual, if you will, dimension of life, all the countless sort of metaphysical maps that have been created to talk about this. books and books and books and books and books and teachings and teachings and teachings, laying out all these sometimes complex frameworks of the stages of this, the way this unfolds, what this is like, the descriptions of awakening and enlightenment and spiritual evolution. And oh my God, right? It's amazing how much is out there. And yet, from my standpoint, and this is just where my own explorations seem to have taken me, if you will, and that is to this very strong sense of this is not knowable. This is not, like, I cannot determine what this is. And this is stunning. This is absolutely stunning, because we live our lives as if we can actually pin this down for most of the time. We actually believe in our ideas about things, that they're true. Whether they're spiritual, kind of metaphysical ideas, or just human everyday life ideas. And I've said this many times before, but I just want to highlight it now, because to me it's the most straightforward, in some sense, most obvious way of seeing the truth of this indeterminacy, this unresolvability. And that is, as always, to feel what's here, because it doesn't matter. We have all these ideas about what's here, but let's actually feel what we call this. Let's call it this that's here, this presence of life, of reality. Of course, it's the only thing we're ever feeling. But we, as a matter of habit, we overlook something that's really very obvious, but seeing the way it actually is upends all of the maps. And that is to see how what we call the moment, this that's here, something's here, right? Something's palpable. You feel something here. Again, forget about what you're calling it, because that's more of the maps, just for a moment. Just feel the presence of it. And notice how our ordinary conceptual way of thinking about life, of talking about life, rendering and mapping life, is very much time-bound. It's this sense of the passage of time. I mean, even to talk about my life, the life of John and my history, right? That's the passage of time. And it isn't as if that isn't an actual way of perceiving life, because it obviously is. I can talk about my history, right? But here we're exploring experience, and experience, it exists outside of history. It exists right now, right? There's absolutely no history right now. Even if memories could occur about what happened yesterday, the day before, 20 years ago, or even a few minutes ago, say earlier in the day, those are all thoughts. They're all ideas, memories, in the form of memories about what happened, presumably. But what happened is a fantasy, in the sense that it's not here. It's not here now. What's here now is this. And the same, of course, with what might be, is also imaginary. We can imagine what might be, and that imagination is a real thing that's occurring now, we could say, that we call imagination. But what's being imagined, that we think of as happening some other time, is not here. What's here is, right, this instant, now, you know? There's a whole book written on it called The Power of Now, a very famous book I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Of course, a title like that and the countless spiritual teachings that are out there and contemplative teachings about sort of tuning into the now, getting acquainted with the now, being in the now, practicing, right? Being present to the moment, all of this stuff often bypasses, just, I don't know, just seems to much of the time, if not almost all the time. Exactly what is the moment? Can you actually, if we're going to talk about it as a thing that exists called now, right? We already established that you can't find what was or what might be, that those are imaginary in the sense of they're being conceived. What's actual is right here, you know, this palpable sense of something being here. But let's just take a moment to explore this palpable sense of now, the moment. And here's the simple invitation. I want you to, you know, in the same way that I could pick up this book and hold it in my hands, like seemingly as an object. I'm talking about it like this, like, okay, I've got a hold of the book. I'm holding the book. I'm showing you the book, right? There it is, you know. It's like it's graspable as a thing. Now look at the moment and see if it's possible for you to grasp hold of the moment. To grasp hold of the moment would require that there's something that endures long enough for you to grasp hold of it. Hold it in your hands, hold it in your consciousness, hold it in your perception, right? Can you do that? Can you hold the moment in your perception? Slippery, isn't it? More than slippery. It's it's so fast, if you want to put it in any kind of time language, that like, so here's a moment, grasp hold of it. It's long gone before there's any effort to even try to grasp hold of it, isn't it? When I say gone, let me clarify something, which is because there is also this sort of paradoxical sense of some kind of constancy, like here doesn't vanish, you know, the presence of reality doesn't seem to, but there's a kind of constancy to reality, which is something we can maybe talk about in a bit. But right now we're looking at the slipperiness of it. And so this that's here, the presence of reality, is how can we possibly, I'm really obviously not talking about grasping hold of it with your fingers, you know, like I might with a physical object, so called. I'm talking about, can you grasp hold of it with your mind? For that matter, can you even grasp hold of what you call the mind? Because that's also a momentary experience. Can you grasp hold of anything experientially long enough to render it and say, oh, this is what it is? Is that possible? To describe, you know, if I were to describe like, let's say, so it's been a bit on the cool end for us here in California where I live, and it's a little cool in my home right now. So if I were to describe an element of the flavor of this moment, what's going on, if I were to map it, I might say, that's a bit cold right now. Okay, so I just described the moment, an aspect of the moment, didn't I? So we could say I kind of grasped hold of the moment long enough to say, that's a bit cold. I mapped it. But this phenomena that I seemingly, this characteristic of reality that I seemingly captured with my description, cold, is not something that's holding still. If you feel the moment, notice how it's not holding still. It's not static. The feeling is alive. It's moving. It's shifting. That's the sense of it. It's got a flow, a fluidity to it, doesn't it? So the moment that I've described something like cold, it's not the same in the very next instant. Not exactly. Why? Because it's as if in the moment, if you were to think about, if you were to slow down this timeless time for a moment, like, and imagine the moment is unfolding, you know, it's appearing, because the appearance is just boom, just here it is. If you imagine it slowing down, you say, oh, the moment's taking shape, it's appearing. It's like, here's my hands are going to try to demonstrate what this this appearing. So here's my hands taking shape like this. So the moment is taking shape, it's appearing, it's blooming, you know, kind of slowly like this. So exactly at what point does the moment become something? Here's the moment. It never becomes something. You see? It's becoming, if you want to put it, if you want to put any kind of word to it. We could say reality is in a state of sorts that we might describe as constant becoming, but never actually becoming something fixed, something that you could grab hold of. Do you feel that? Do you feel how ungraspable it is? Try to grab it. Try to hold on to it. Try to name it. Try to describe it. Try to map it. And the very instant, even before that very instant, it's becoming something else. It's absolutely the trippiest thing that the moment is becoming something. See if this makes sense to you. It's the moment is becoming something other than itself. It never becomes something. They have a term for this in the Zen tradition, the unborn. The moment never is born. Seems like it is, but that's its magical display. It looks like it became all of you, reality. It looks like it became your experience that you have all these names and labels and descriptions for, right? It looks like it became a Zoom call. It looked like it became a conversation. It looks like it becomes joy and fear and ecstasy and terror and a world. And it looks like something, doesn't it? But if you were to say what it looks like, you would not be able to say, because it's constantly transforming itself. It's that, in that sense, it is here for no time. The moment is here for no time. I use this illustration in a meditation I did for the Waking Up app. I've mentioned this before, but it just sort of came to me. It just made a lot of sense, just as a visceral sort of illustration of the point I'm trying to make. So if you imagine a train going by, you're on the tracks and you're waiting for the train to arrive, okay? But there's a train that's going to come by before the train you're waiting for, and it's not going to stop. So the train's coming, it's approaching, it's approaching, it's approaching. And we could say that that's the buildup to the moment. So it's approaching, and it finally gets to the point where you are on the tracks. And you could say, now it's arrived where you are. That's the moment of arrival of now, right? Here it is. The train has arrived, but the train's moving. It's not stopping, just like life. It's not stopping. There's no stop button. So the train keeps moving, doesn't it? So what would you say the answer to this question is? When the train arrives where you are on the tracks, is it arriving or is it departing? What's the answer to that question? The answer to that question is spiritual liberation. I'm not kidding. Because you can't say whether it's arriving or departing, can you? It's neither or both. It's got to be one way or the other. It can't be arriving and departing because that doesn't make logical sense. But this moment that's here right now, let's say this moment that's appearing, the appearance of this moment is the train in my little metaphor. This moment that's here, is it arriving or is it departing? You see that train's going by and you can't grab hold of it because it's gone. It's just went, boom, vanished. So is the moment appearing or is it vanishing? Is it being born? Is reality being born in this instant or is it dying? And what is the difference between birth and death of the moment? No, there's no difference whatsoever. The birth of the moment is the death of the moment. The birth of my words right now is their death. They're dying as they're coming out of my mouth, right? So they're arising, aren't they? Just like the train. My words are arising and they're vanishing as they arise. Amazing, isn't it? In that sense, not only is there no past and no future, but there is no present. Not one you could grab hold of and name. Oh, this is what it is. And yet we have these elaborate, like unbelievably complex maps, scientific maps, philosophical maps, political maps, ideological maps, metaphysical, spiritual maps, and on and on and on, books and books and books and books and books describing this that's here, that is here for no time. Now, isn't that hysterical? We're like mapping. This image came to me this morning. Like, it's like we're mapping the dream, seemingly, and yet it's a dream. So what exactly are we mapping? It seems like we're mapping something that's actual. I was a scientist for a lot of my life, and scientists are all about trying to figure out cause-effect relationships. Like, if this happens, then what happens, And in one sense, it feels like that's true and it has a certain kind of validity, and like we can make predictions about things within all these kind of what I call the perspective of the seemingly describable world. Like, I jump off the building, and if it's high enough building, splat, I'm dead on the ground, like a cause effect. Jumping leads to my demise. And we can talk about life like that. Like I just described the whole scenario. And this is a tricky thing, is like that all seems to be true in one sense. And we operate again within that frame of reference of bodies in motion and bodies in relationship, objects in relationship to one another, time, space, cause and effect. Those are all maps. And I'm not saying they have somehow no validity to them, because from within the frames of reference, from within those frames of reference, they do have validity. It's just that there's this other frame of reference where none of the maps have any validity whatsoever because what we mapped isn't here anymore. We can only map what's here. What anything else is mapping some abstraction. If we want to try to map reality, well, we have to look at what's here and let's try to map this. I mean, what's so astonishing about this is as I said, it flies in the face of conventional consensus reality, like to put it mildly. So all the things that are talked about from the perspective I'm sharing right now, within a spiritual context, all these things that we talk about of like self-identity and grasping and believing in the mind's narratives and spiritual bondage and all these things that we've heard about. And then there's all these elaborate ways to sort of extricate ourselves from these seeming things that we're somehow bound up in. Reality itself is already free of any such things because reality itself is not a thing. There's nothing bound. There's nothing here in the sense of anything that could be pinned down or defined. You know, and the physicists are, the physical physicists, you know, studying the physical world, material world, are scratching their heads because they can't determine what this is. And as a physicist I had a recent conversation with told me, we never will. I mean, try right now. Take any experience you're having that you might describe, you know, the simplest thing, like your breath, right? It's a pretty neutral thing. There's no real charge there. It's just your breath, what you call the breath. And you tell me, take a few moments and tell me, what is the essence of your breath? Can you determine what that is? Can you grasp hold of what makes the breath the breath? Something's there. Can you pin down what that is? Can you determine what that is? Feel your breath. What you call breath, there's something there, concretely there. Go to to discover that this is ungraspable. This is a great irony of all of this. To discover how ungraspable and unresolvable this is, that you cannot find this. The place to discover, the way to discover that this cannot be found as a thing is to go to what's most concrete in your experience, most palpable. Don't go to some abstraction. Go to the feeling of the moment, which is not an abstraction. It's here, you know. It's the sense of touch. It's palpable. And feel that, you know, feel touch sensation. You know, put your hand on something or feel that, as I was saying, feel breathing. It's very palpable. It's very concrete. Something's here. But it's empty of identity. It's empty of essence in the sense of you cannot identify what it is. You cannot find it. Because the minute you try to put your finger on what it is, it's what you thought it was is no longer here. That's why you can't put your finger on it, because it keeps slipping away. I just read this line from the Tibetan teacher, Longchenpa, a friend sent me, and was describing what I'm talking about as timelessly non-existent. But here at the same time. Here, but non-existent. Because this is vividly here, isn't it? This is so vividly here. I am vividly here. You are vividly here, appearing as a body, as a mind, as a person, as a world. All of this that's so vividly here, and yet impossible to determine what it is. In that sense, not a thing at all. Timelessly non-existent. And that timeless non-existence that Longchenpa's talking about is the very basis of every moment of experience. That's what makes all the experience equal in its basis, equal in its unresolvability, equal in its infinite indeterminism, its infinite emptiness. But that this emptiness is so full at the same time. It's full of all this apparent quality and texture and flavor and richness of life. So it's not a negation of any of that richness. It's just this paradox that this rich appearance in all of its diversity and complexity and sometimes seemingly problematic nature can't be pinned down as being something. It's free. It's free of identity, free of name and label and description and mapping. And it just transcends all of it. And that's what we are. We are this transcendental infinity, as is everything. And we are that, period, without having to do anything. That's just our nature.